District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
The world moves fast. Your workday? Even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Welcome to a special USDA-themed District of Conservation. I'm joined by Natural Resources Conservation Service Chief Bettencourt. And we're going to talk about ag conservation, her role, demystifying what the USDA does. Chief Bettencourt, very lovely to talk to you. We have California ties. I think you should talk about that first and your background before we dip into your role, but a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here with you, and it's so great to sit down with you. I've just admired the work that you've done for so long and for conservation in general, both the hook and bullet side as well as the ag side, so I appreciate you being here.
We were bonding over that, and I was totally unaware because there's so many social media followers, but it's a treat to hear that, and I'm honored to hear that. And I've been following your work, and it's very exciting, and I love having seeing a fellow Californian in this role. But speak to your background, because you're from California, Central Valley. Yeah. It's the former breadbasket. I think it's still the breadbasket of the United States. But talk about how your background shaped and influenced your current role now here at USDA.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I like to tell everybody I'm an unapologetic California farm girl. And I think that's important because, out west, it's different. We farm in a real different landscape out there. We are the most regulated farming community in the country. And so I would just say it starts with that. It starts with, I should probably be in therapy for what I'm doing. My goal is to keep farmers farming, to get water to people who need it, to take care of the resources that take care of all of us, and to get high-speed internet everywhere in the country, because it's the indoor plumbing of the 21st century. And so what's been so amazing is, it's a blessing to find yourself at a place in your life where all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, everything makes sense. It led to here. And that's really been the blessing of being at NRCS and being able to serve Secretary Rollins and President Trump, my second time serving with President Trump. And to be knowing, and I knew this early in my career too, that to be in service to my country meant to be in service to my community, and I've had the blessing to be able to do that throughout my life and my career, and this is no different than that.
And you were raised on an almond farm, if I understand.
Yeah, actually, we didn't get into almonds till later, but we started off in, it was a dairy farm when my great-grandfather came from Portugal, bought it in 1941. And then we bought the farm from my great-grandmother in the 90s, and we were more into diversified row crops at the time. Pima cotton was one of the first things we piloted, and processing tomatoes and alfalfa, corn for silage. We had obviously a booming dairy community in the central part of the state as well. And then we got into permanent crops, particularly almonds and walnuts. And now we do a little bit of everything, and it all comes down to what our water portfolio allows us to do. So whether it's alfalfa or garbanzo beans, onions, garlic, wine grapes, pistachios, tomatoes, still doing a little bit of cotton. Obviously, we still have the almond trees. And we always leave a little bit of ground open because that's what it takes now to manage our water through a holistic whole farm approach, is we're thinking through how we manage the resources, particularly water in the central part of California, in a way that allows us the maximum amount of flexibility. And it's finding that profitability and resourcefulness, that sustainability within the farm. And so we think very holistically about what we do. We have to be able to think very quickly. We're blessed to have a 365-day growing season in California. That Mediterranean climate is spectacular for us. It allows us that diversification. But I think it also unwittingly informed, my conservation mindset as well. Not just water. I've been dubbed Queen Drip Tape. But that was a huge part of that. So precision irrigation and technology, data management to make and inform good decisions are critical for our ability to farm. And having that data and owning it myself as a farmer is important for me, not only how I manage my farm, but also how I'm going to comply with regulatory circumstances, or now market access, as we are seeing different consumer demands in the marketplace for how we grow or how we produce or what we're doing on our farm. That data belonging to me as the farmer, as the one who is risking everything to perform that or to produce that outcome, is vital. It's capital. It's market access, it's decision making, it's good resource management for us. So the same thing with soil management and nutrient management, pest management, beneficial species management. I always talk about NRCS and my whole NRCS leadership team, and really for the first time in recent history, the entire NRCS political team came from the field. And that was incredibly important to me, because I wanted us to have a team that knew what it meant to relate to the agency by walking in the front door of that county office, who knew what it meant to be a partner with the agency, who knew the absolute unbelievably wonderful things the members of our NRCS team across the landscape are and the people they are in our community, but also knew the just frustration of filling out the same piece of paperwork 3 times or waiting to be awarded because you're being ranked thousands of times in that process. We needed to know what it meant to relate to the agency from the customer perspective so that we could reverse engineer the changes that make a difference here at the agency.
Speak more broadly to USDA, because I think people are aware that farmers and ranchers exist. They know that agriculture is a very big industry in many states. It's the #1 private sector industry, but they don't know what the function of USDA is. Could you help demystify what USDA does before going into your agency?
That's a really great question. And what's so interesting is I believe we are the 3rd largest agency in the federal government, or 3rd largest department in the federal government. What's so interesting, the Secretary talks so great about the history of the department being founded by Abraham Lincoln. And I think it's interesting to think about USDA in the arc of societal development, right? Because now agriculture is 2% of the population. We are on average 6 generations separate from the landscape. So USDA probably means a lot to some people, but not really, because they don't understand. They don't know a farmer anymore. So we know farming, but we don't know farmers. Mm-hmm. And what the Department of Agriculture does is it supports not only the food and nutrition side, which we are all very familiar with, the SNAP program, the WIC program, school lunches. I think that's a lot of what people see. I think the other thing is consumers relate to that USDA Prime stamp on their steaks when they go to the store. They know what that means. But what I think they miss about USDA is we are possibly, and I know for our agency and the Farm Service Agency and others, we are potentially the most forward-facing department of the federal government. In that, for instance, NRCS, we have an office in almost every county in the country. So a lot of people like to talk about, we watch the national news and we think big federal policies make a huge impact in our lives. But if you really take a minute and think about where you connect with your federal government, it's generally not that direct unless you're in farming, in which case you walk into a county office and you are a direct customer of your federal government, or you are a direct partner of your federal government in that regard. So the U.S. Department of Agriculture's job really, and I think today, knowing what we know of the landscape that we just described about how many generations we are separate from the land, and we talk about food security being national security, that is absolutely true. The Roman Empire fell because it had foreign sources of food and fuel. The United States, in order to maintain its prosperity, its public health, I'm so glad we're talking about that, will require farmers on the landscape farming to their highest and best ability, taking care of the natural resources to afford us that. And that is what USDA does through every aspect of the entire department.
Which is why I think your agency within the department is very critical. And my listeners will be familiar with NRCS because of the Conservation Reserve Program and some other facets of it. But speak more broadly to that, if you can. Like, some people may still have questions. What does it do? What does voluntary conservation look like in the framework of USDA? So explain what you do on a day-to-day basis and how it relates back to conservation.
Well, I don't want to say I go to meetings all day. But what I will say is this. So let's take a little history lesson. NRCS just celebrated its 90th year. So 90 years ago, the federal government of the United States said it is vital to the entire population, to the entire prosperity of the nation, to keep farmers on the landscape farming to the highest and best ability that they can. And that really was the founding of the NRCS. I think this is important, so I'm going to get into the history lesson. The way NRCS got started was it was addressing the existential threat at the time. The existential threat at the time was the Dust Bowl. We were losing feet of topsoil, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners know that history. And it truly was our founder, Hugh Hammond Bennett, who he was a great showman. We were just talking about that. He actually clocked a dust storm. He knew it was going to hit D.C. We have these pictures in my office. I'd love to share them with you.
Yeah, please.
He went to Capitol Hill and opened the windows so that the dust could come in and the sun could be blacked out.
Wow.
And so we have photos of the Lincoln Memorial covered in dust, and the sun is blacked out from the dust blowing all the way from the Midwest. And that really was the foundation of the agency. And it said, oh my gosh, to survive as a people, we need to go out and we need to change the way that we are farming in order to keep them on the landscape to make sure that this never happens again. Fast forward, they were addressing issues then from food security through World War II. And then even fasting forward even further, where we are realizing, and I think today we realize it even more so, that a farmer on the landscape is how we take care of our natural resources, not only for agricultural productivity, but also for natural heritage. Our partnerships with, we say the hook and bullet crowd, but our partnerships there are critical. Everyone on my team is a sportsman, myself included. And I grew up hunting and fishing on my farm, right? I mean, that's our relationship to the land. And so the idea of keeping farmers on the landscape is still foundational. Not today, the existential threat, and really what we talk about at NRCS today is our recommitment to our founding principles of keeping a farmer on the landscape is critically important for all the reasons we've discussed. But today, the existential threat is this. We are losing 5,000 acres of farmland a day in the United States. That's open ground. And as we've talked about, and that's not to anything other than development. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a housing crisis and that we shouldn't address that, but it means that it is even more important today that we have great leadership like Secretary Rollins and others who say it's about smart development to support, that there are not mutually exclusive things here, that we don't live in a time of scarcity, but a time of abundance, and that we can solve this problem. And so it is really empowering, I think, for NRCS today to recommit itself to its first principles of being out in the field, providing that technical assistance, and then the financial assistance that goes with that, leveraging our partnerships to their maximum ability to provide the most amount of service and the greatest and highest applicable science and services to our farmers across the landscape for all of those reasons.
And there are real pressing threats. I won't have you wade into political stuff, but in the state of Oregon, there's like a ballot initiative to eliminate hunting, fishing, ranching.
I saw that.
And that is very scary. So it's good to have an agency, administration that could perhaps buttress against that.
California had the same issue last year, Measure J, to ban all animal agriculture in Sonoma County, of all places. Now, these are century farms, most of them organic, and they beat it back. This was the most amazing piece, and I think it tells us where our country actually is as opposed to that. They beat it back because the question that got posed to the local communities were, do you want to support your local food system? Do you want to support your local farmer? And it was, yes, I want to know where my food comes from. I want to know that it's from my local farmer, and I want to support them. And I think that's the mission that we have here today. And I think we're at a really amazing time. I think there's a lot of wonderful progress going in the right direction of reconnecting with our agricultural community, with our customer base. And I have to give credit to increased conversation around dietary guidelines and eating whole food and knowing where that comes from and having that connection back to our consumer.
I was very happy to see the changes that you did with HHS on that because it deprioritizes carbohydrates, reemphasizes meat, proteins, and healthy products. So I think a lot of people were very excited to see that. I was very thrilled to see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's about eating whole food, right? And that's that comes from great whole American farmers.
And I want to speak to and ask you about this tension sometimes we see working in the hook and bullet crowd. Sometimes I see people levy attacks on ranchers and farmers saying that they're responsible for fertilizing, improperly creating water quality issues. And that's not always the case. And sometimes it happens by accident. Most of the time, they're not culpable. I've seen this in states like Florida. I've tried to shine a light on it and say, like, actually, you need more nuance. But it seems like farmers and ranchers sometimes unnecessarily get scapegoated as despoilers of the environment, even more than hook and bullet people.
Yeah.
And so that tension, I don't think should exist, but people still make that out to be. So
Sure.
I want you to respond and tell me your thoughts on how agriculture and conservation are not at odds with each other.
Yeah, I think, gosh, I've seen that play over and over again in California too. And I think there's a false narrative by those who benefit from conflict that it's an or situation. So I'd be looking at anybody who sues and settles as fostering that conflict where it really doesn't need to exist. And the history shows it differently. One of some of our greatest partners are organizations that are working actively with farmers and ranchers and working lands to develop habitat for critical species, or for Pacific, or for flyway protection, or for migratory game corridors. Who do you think is going to do that? It's got to be people on the landscape. Now, another thing is to be realistic. I'm very realistic. I don't farm the same way my great-grandfather did. I have a totally different insight. I have majorly new technology available to me. I have a better understanding in science and resource history and management technologies available to me, and techniques available to me to do that. And I think that also comes back to making sure that we are giving credit where credit is due. And this is a foundation at NRCS right now. We've had the ability to actually do outcomes-based reporting. We just haven't been doing it. It's been primarily focused on carbon. But we've had the ability to look at that around soil health, nutrient application, soil microbiome health, runoff, and so many others, natural vitality, habitat, et cetera. And what we are finding is we have to be able, and I think this is on us today as a conservation community, both hook and bullet as well as agriculture, we need to work on this together.
We have the same common enemies, I think.
We have the same challenges. Yeah. And I think we have to work on this together in this regard. We can no longer measure success as dollars on acres. We have to measure success of what the dollar on the acre got us. So if this is also around, we have to get away from drive-by conservation. If we keep doing bright and shiny objects instead of saying, no, this is the priority for this watershed, and let's align and work on that together, we will never have the measurable results we're actually trying to achieve. And the truth of the matter is we can and do show incredible progress. I recently was at the Hypoxia Task Force, and I had the privilege of working on that in Trump 45 when I was working at Department of Interior. And I was amazed to sit and see, yes, we still have challenges ahead of us, but we've actually done amazing work. And we've actually seen incredible improvement in certain areas. And it's telling us we know what works. Now let's identify where we can coordinate and double down and maximize resources to get those outcomes of reduced nutrient application or reduced runoff. We have the ability now to track and trace that a whole lot better. Whether we're talking about habitat development or you pick your metric, we can measure it. And again, being able to measure that and tie that back to the exact voluntary practice that afforded us that has value. That has value. That has value in measuring our progress. That has value in the marketplace. That has value, and for me, as the fierce and fighting for the farmer, we assign that back to the entity that took the risk to do that, and that would be the farmer on the landscape.
I'm optimistic because I see all over Northern Virginia, where I live, these kind of I wouldn't call them recreational. They're agribusinesses, but they're advertising parties and experiences with mini Highland cows, which are adorable. So I think your agency needs to work with them somehow to even perhaps shed even more misconceptions about farming, and especially cows. I think everyone agrees that attacking livestock is a foolish endeavor, especially because so many people love to eat meat. You're not going to get rid of meat. It's a foolhardy policy to encourage either plant-based meat by dictate or discouraging people from eating meat. Give people choices. Let's do that. But I think even accompanying industries like the agribusiness, agritourism of interacting with the cattle, or the Valno black-nosed sheep, which is very cute. One of my friends has a farm in Middleburg, and he has dozens of them and they're so adorable. So I think agriculture is getting a second look, and even the conservation practices, because there has to be a lot that goes into it. Like they're going to be tending the land. They're not going to be trampling on private property rights. They're going to be cognizant of soil, all these other conditions. So I think those kind of hobby farms are helping to sell what USDA is trying to do with the mission and enhancing farming.
Yeah, we definitely, look, I think, I've said this before, I think for a long time we assumed because people ate, they knew who we were and they appreciated what we did. And that's almost the equivalent of the husband who forgot to bring flowers home every once in a while, right? And just rekindle that relationship. What is so wonderful about, I think, social media, but also the increased shift societally towards health, it's really put a new emphasis on, well, where is it coming from, and where does it come from, and how does it get to me? I think, too, we have to be cognizant, though, that there are forces at work that have made promises on balance sheets to investors that want certain things grown a certain way. And so that's where I think NRCS has its, first and foremost, as the foremost public-facing farm applied science agency and natural resource applied science agency in the federal government, we have a very unique and important role to say, yes, there are probably places that we dug up and shouldn't have farmed. I can tell you right now, as a customer of NRCS, one of my first projects was a restoration on a farm, because it was a farm that got plowed up that it could tell you it didn't want to be farmed. And the reason I know it couldn't be farmed and didn't want to be farmed is I had to put so much into it to try to get a crop out of it. That ground did not want to be farmed. Half a mile to the north, same farm, 1,000 acres to the north, gorgeous, perfect, wanted to be farmed, easy to be farmed. And I think where we are at, back to that smart development piece, NRCS has a very unique role to step in the fray and say, to tell that story, to demonstrate that there are smart ways to do this, that we have the applied science and the resources available for that, but to maintain that voluntary component to it. That is so foundational to who we are as an agency. Because what we are asking when a farmer or rancher or landowner comes in and says, I want to do XYZ practice on my farm, they are saying, I am willing to. It's important to understand this too. NRCS doesn't just cut checks. We require an investment from the farmer. And we require a practice to be achieved to certain standards. This isn't free money. And so that farmer is taking a risk, changing their cultural behavior, which results in a financial risk until that practice pays it off. I'll give you an example. Coming from the irrigated West, I put in a pressurized drip irrigation system in order to, stretch my water conservation. That system took me 3 years to pay it off.
Wow.
But it increased my yield by almost about 35 to 45%, and cut my water use by 50%.
Incredible.
And that's how it paid me off. But I took the risk in that. NRCS provided me that wonderful leverage to help me get there. But ultimately, that benefit that was achieved, that belongs to the farmer. And that's where we come back to, we have the opportunity, I think, to tell that story and to better put that story back out into to the public. And I think we have an opportunity now, thanks to new media, thanks to increased attention to that, to help reconnect our farmers and our landowners back to the consumer and to the public in that new way. And to talk about not just dollars on acres, but what the dollar on the acre got us. And more importantly, what the dollar on the acre got us because of the farmer. And I think that's where we have a really great story to tell.
It absolutely is a compelling story to tell, and that's why I'm speaking to you in this platform, because I think people need to know, and they need to understand that there's so much more to this than just doling out money or doing this or giving farmers special privileges, and much more beyond. And there should be voluntary incentives. As a conservative conservationist, I fully believe you can't depend on the government. You shouldn't for many things.
Well, the free market's going to do better than any mandate could.
Yes.
And I think we've seen that over and over again.
A perennial issue for the last few years has been the Farm Bill reauthorization. I just saw that, I think out of the House, we saw a framework possibly come out. Are you optimistic? Is the Secretary optimistic that a Farm Bill reauthorization package will be passed? Is it necessary to pass it? How urgent?
Well, that's actually a good question. Yeah. So for NRCS, I am fully prepared for any vehicle that finances the agency. And I think the reason I can say that is going back to 2015, we have seen nothing but extensions and then maybe a mini here and there, and then an extension here, and then really starting with, I think it was the BIL, you saw certain parts of USDA get fully financed in something that wasn't a farm bill. Same thing with IRA, and now with OBA, NRCS now has the largest baseline funding in conservation in its history, and it got that through OBA. So whatever Congress is going to do, God bless them, God love them, I am here to answer any of their questions. And to provide that technical assistance back to them upon request. But I am fully prepared for a world where NRCS, at least in my purview, is going to achieve its financing through other means and other vehicles, because that's what we've seen in recent history. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think we can get into the weeds of why that may or may not be. But I think for me, it's any and every vehicle is now on the table for potentially financing USDA. And so I have high hopes for a farm bill. I have high hopes for any bill that may or may not attach us to it.
It just takes Congress, and it seems like they're in a stalemate for many issues right now currently.
It does. I think, again, I think that's on that end of the street, right. and we're here to be good partners, but at the end of the day, as the executive branch, we execute, and that's what I'm more worried about, and that's what my priority is to get it out on the landscape and to show results. Because, again, why do we need to measure in more than dollars and acres? Because we better be able to tell them the same thing, and that's part of the accountability structure of our great experiment here.
Is there anything that you have not touched upon about your agency, your priorities that you'd like to share before we round out the conversation?
Oh my gosh. First of all, this has been fun. I think as we look through what we're doing at NRCS, there's a couple of things. Keeping farmers on the landscape, we are working that actively through our agricultural conservation easement program. And I think you're going to see some really amazing, and the Secretary has been on the forefront of, again, working lands and working hands and what that looks like. And so you're seeing a huge emphasis in that space for us. This is also what has been so important, and that we have found inside of NRCS is no surprise, the federal government is technologically behind the 8 ball. What has been so wonderful about the early hit the ground running of the DOGE team and now our OCIO team and so many others is we are actively investing in the largest upgrade of technology inside of NRCS and inside of the FPAC mission area that will finally be the customer in mind on this. And necessity is the mother of invention. So you heard about the One Farmer, One File program that just rolled out. My dad called me one morning as I just started here, and he called me, and he's the nicest, sweetest man, and he was complaining about having to drive 50 miles back to the county office to sign the exact same form for NRCS that he had signed for FSA a month earlier. And I said, this makes no sense. You're the same farmer, and it's the same agency, and we share information on the back end. We should be able to see you in one place. And so One Farmer, One File is moving us in that direction. From an NRCS perspective, we're getting away from the filing cabinet and back out into the field where we belong by developing a mobile-based tool called the Integrated Field Tool that will allow us to do in-field whole farm planning with the farmer, changing the business model away from farmers coming in and saying, what do you have for me? And turning it into being out in the field and saying, here's what we can do with you. What would you like to do? And really putting the power back into our staff and back into our farmers to do that. Along those lines, though, it's about streamlining, and we hear that everywhere, but reducing redundancy and inefficiency. We recently went through a process. Our goal is to give the power and the decision-making back to those closest to the problem, whether we're talking about developing habitat or wetland restoration or on-farm conservation efforts. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. But our programs were so cumbersome, they were not allowing for that. One of the reasons it took so long for applications to get heard or seen was because we were ranking applications thousands of times. So we would have to rank a singular application through thousands of scenarios in order to say where you qualified, because we had put overly prescriptive things on this. So by eliminating a lot of that fluff, we're now empowering back out to the field. You get ranked once, and you get to work with your local team to say, yes, this applies to me, and I'm going to move forward. And we're eliminating 85,000 hours of staff time, which means our staff now has the ability to serve more people. They're going to be armed with the technology to serve more people, and they are empowered with the programmatic support and leadership support to do that too. So we're putting people back in the field where they belong.
That's excellent, because I think people are tired of bureaucracy. It doesn't matter how you swing politically. people just want more efficiency, and that's very encouraging. I've seen this across Department of Interior, and it's also good to see that in this agency and department as well. If listeners want to learn more about the NRCS, what you're up to, how to connect with you, what links would you like to send them?
Go to nrcs.usda.gov. Find us across social media as well. We try to do highlights across the country of the great work we're doing across the landscape, and really feature not only our great team who's out there, but also our amazing farmers, ranchers, and stewards of the land who are doing phenomenal work. And so I think it's important, like you said, as much as we hear about the bad, the good far outweighs that. We're going to try to measure it and put it out there so everybody can stand firmly behind that and be proud of it. This is part of our cultural heritage, is taking care of our landscape and the working men and women on the landscape who do that with us and for us.
And should people come to D.C.? Because I saw when I was entering the USDA building, the advertisement for the Great America Fair. I think that's happening on the wall leading up to 250.
Farmers Market and the Great American Fair. We actually do have, NRCS actually has a garden on site.
Excellent.
And so that's getting its spring refresh. We're getting ready to start spring planting there. And I don't know, back in the day we used to graze cows on the mall, so maybe we'll do that again. If Park Service will give me the permit, we'll graze cows out there. We'll show everybody how
Mini
it's done.
Highland cows.
We'll do it.
That's a good way to have it.
We'll do it.
Chief Bettencourt, such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Yep.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.